Is the US economy really that strong? Everybody talks about the strong US economy. Even though interest rates went up, we still have strong economic growth. In this video, you will learn that the US economy is everything else than strong. In fact, it's dangerously weak. Let's just look back what the economic growth was last year in 2023, 2.5%. That translates into roughly 563 billion of real GDP growth. Looks fine, but only if we are not going forward to the next chart. The next chart shows you a completely different picture, and it shows you an ugly picture, because the 563 billion of economic growth, or the 2.5 of real GDP growth, is actually very low in comparison to the fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit of the US, just on the federal level last year, was about 1.7 trillion. This translates into 6.5% of real GDP. You get the message. If we didn't spend like crazy, if we didn't spend the equivalent of 6.5% of real GDP, we would not have any economic growth at all. In fact, we would have a very bad recession. And that's what the next chart shows. In Europe, everybody talks about the weak German economy, but you have to keep in mind, in Germany, they are not, rightly or wrongly, they are not going into massive fiscal debt. And that's why the economic growth was marginally negative. But if we adjust the US economic growth for this incredible fiscal deficit, now the picture looks totally different. We would have had a really bad recession. And that's not surprising, because we had a reversal of interest rates that was one of the most aggressive reversals of interest rates in the US history. Now, if we look at the consequences, not surprisingly, what the US government has to pay for new interest rate expenses every year went through the roof. You see it here. Now, for 2023, we're close to 1 trillion in interest rate expenses. That's a dramatic number. Keep in mind that the federal revenue was only 4.4 trillion last year. So that's all the tax receipts, everything the US government took in. And for the interest rate expense, we have already to pay 1 trillion. And the dramatic picture gets even worse when you think about that every month old debt that was issued at low interest rates will have to be reissued at much higher interest rates, sometimes 4 or 5% points higher. Now, you get the picture. The US economy is not very strong. In fact, it's dangerously weak. And the only reason we see economic growth is for debt. And keep in mind, in this presentation, we only talk about federal debt. In addition, we have credit card debt and corporate debt and consumer debt rising at very high levels. And at the same time, we have a lot of deposits that people accumulated in bank accounts and money market funds that are drained right now, because that amount of money was accumulated during COVID with all the transfer payments, and now we are draining our saving account. So what I expect is the following, and you have to prepare for this. We are trapped in our debt-based economic growth paradigm. That was the paradigm of the past. And unfortunately, that will not work anymore with higher interest rates and inflation. And what central banks do right now with this dramatic increase of interest rates, they risk an economic collapse and a severe recession. particularly if they pursue the higher for longer interest rate policy that they have in place right now and that they are talking about. You have to keep in mind, interest rate hikes need a time until they work through the economy, because there's still a lot of old debt out there that was issued at rates of 1%, 2%, mortgages, 30-year mortgages for 3 and something percent. That's history. But they still support economic growth right now. But these old debt issuances are running off and they have to be replaced. So what I'm afraid of, and what you need to prepare, whether you are a CEO of a company, business manager, small business owner, or investor, is the second inflation shock. And I will have another video on this in this series, because the second inflation shock is always the worst. And that's what you have to prepare for. Watch that video, because then you see what happened in the 1970s. So what you can do is, what I recommend is study the 1970s. I have a special class on this that you can take. And it's very important that you understand the inflation mechanics from back then, because we are about to go through the same procedures as back then. And that's my personal opinion. And I think that Warren Buffett thinks a little bit different, because he does exactly the same what he did in the 1970s right now. He keeps a lot of cash, even though equity markets are at record levels. He did the same back then in 1972. There will be another video on this too, to prepare you. So keep in mind, there's a lot of resources out there that can help you, but you need to prepare. If you want to prepare with me, great. You can also take other classes or read other books if you find people. In terms of books, I wrote a book in 2016 which exactly explained what we're going through right now. You can also, if you're a company or a big fund, I give management workshops, or online take one of my classes. The Advanced Inflation Management class is a very good starter. You learn everything about practical, not theoretical, practical inflation management. You can take the class Warren Buffett Decoded that starts in a few days. It's online self-study with discussion groups, or you can look at my detailed outlook. The book was covering 2016 to 2023. And I think I got everything pretty much right in this book. But now going forward, 24 to 2030, there will be a new online forecast that you can look. Very easy. You don't have to read 366 pages again. A lot of CEOs told me, please make a video, much easier for us. I heard you. So you will have the opportunity to have a class on my forecast, what I anticipate, basically the continuation of my book, what I forecast going forward until 2030. And unfortunately, the title says it all. It will be an ugly world, the ugly world of tomorrow, but only if you're not prepared. If you're prepared like Warren Buffett in the 70s, it could be one of your best times ever. Thank you for watching. If you have questions, use the comments or send me an email. Thank you.